I made a bad mistake, Brad. So last night, we're sitting at the dining room table. We're having dinner. My daughter says, "You have a podcast, right, Dad?"
Oh, no. Oh, no.
And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "What's it called?" And I said, "Well, why don't you tell me what it's called?" And she said, "Well, I don't know what it's called." And I said, "Well, maybe your mom knows." And Mom looked at me and she was like, huh. And there was a moment I could have let it go. I chose not to. I chose to push on.
Okay.
She was like, it took a while and we got to Tech Pod. I was like, that's part of the name.
Probably arguably the important part.
I could have backed down at that point happily. I could have just walked away and taken my lumps and let the ego take the hit and moved right on. But no, it's like, well, what's the full name? Sweatpants Tech Pod. I was like, no, that's the Twitter handle because Tech Pod was taken. That's closer. Yeah, we're getting there.
Impressive.
Yeah. So we worked all the way down the path and it took a while. Also, she thinks that the past tense name was a mistake. It should have been Make a Tech Pod instead of Made a Tech Pod. And I was like, well,
you should listen to your daughter.
This feedback would have been great 200 episodes ago.
I felt a chill down my spine when you opened this conversation.
Well,
parents, is it time to talk to your children about podcasts?
Well, okay. So the interest in podcasting goes up as they get older because, it's an approachable piece of content that kids can make. They like,
as we all know, podcasts are for old people.
Yeah, but also it turns out there is a robust podcast listening audience in the youth market because like there are a lot of story driven, like they're essentially like serialized audiobooks for kids.
Sure.
That are like fully acted. And then there's also a lot of like news shows that are targeted toward kids because there's no COPA in podcast world. There's no rules.
Don't I know it?
Like you don't have to be 13 to make a podcast. You have to be 13 to have a YouTube or a TikTok or a Twitch. But if you want to make a podcast and you're 9 years old, let her rip. Nobody's going to stop you.
Is it time to regulate podcasts?
Fuck no. That's the best part about podcasts. We can say whatever we want.
I mean, maybe you can.
Okay. Well, but I mean, what I'm saying is we could find a kid named Brad and a kid named Will and make them do this podcast and pay them like $50 a week and call it a day.
No, that's thinking like a small business owner.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I am Brad.
Hello.
Hi.
This week, first off, there's a Patreon episode that went up last week that we talked about. You finally have bit the bullet and decided to go to Windows 11. And I can't let that go.
I did.
You still doing it? You still there?
Yeah.
Is your business centered or your business left justified?
Oh no, that was, as discussed on the Patreon episode, the literal first thing I did was just left justify the start.
Okay. We're not going to rehash the whole thing, but if you want to hear that, you can get it. You can get it if you're on the Patreon, and maybe when one of us has the flu or something, we'll dump an episode out in the future.
I will say though, plans moving forward on a PC rebuild.
Really?
That is going to necessitate a Windows 11 install, let's say.
Oh, wow. That says some things.
Make of that what you will, but also I will do a fresh install at that point.
Well, if you're going to change anything major, you always want to do a fresh install.
As soon as the motherboard changes, the Windows is getting wiped in my world.
I'm feeling like over the holidays, I might do it. I've been having weird sleep problems, which I think like... Look, my computer has been seeing some stuff this year with the memory problems and all the stuff that I had. So I can run a scan now and everything seems fine. But just generally speaking, wiping that thing, giving it the old clean start, not a bad idea necessarily.
See, now you're just striking terror into my heart because you're on the thing that I am looking to move to in order to not experience weird problems like that.
Well, so they fixed the memory controller by all reports in the 14th gen. So it's a little bit more stable, even if you do something stupid like run too fast memory on it, which I think would have solved most of my problems. But anyway, we're not here to talk about computers today. Well, we are here to talk about computers, but we're going to talk about, we're taking a trip down memory lane.
Yeah, we're not here to talk about 2023 computers. We're here to talk about circa 2000, turn of the century computers.
The year is 2000. It's the end of the 19th century. Wait, no, it's the end of the 20th century.
There you go.
We're on the cusp of the 21st century. It's December of 2000.
Yes, the end of the end of the world happened 11 months ago.
Yeah, the end of the world's been and done. We're in that glowing period between Y2K and before 9/11. So like the whole world is our oyster. The economy is booming. The ad market is just, it's astounding. If you sell an ad on the web, on the internet, you can get as much as $75 or $100 per 1,000 page views for it.
What?
Yeah, because they're hard to do, it turns out at that point.
What?
Yeah. Print ads even still doing great.
Dude, that is so much money.
Yeah. And Google doesn't exist. They haven't started destroying ad markets left and right. So,
Man. It was a simpler time.
At this time, I was a young new editor at Maximum PC Magazine, Future US, I think we were Future S. We might still have been Imagine then, but one of our sister magazines had the biggest non-business issue we'd ever seen in December of 2000, which was 260 pages, I think, of PC Gamer.
Yes.
PC Gamer had a tagline, which I don't have I'm not on the right page, but I believe
it's mostly hidden behind this very ominous looking future riot cop guy.
Yeah, it was the world's best PC games magazine.
Yes, that's what I can make out here. He's a very imposing looking drum magazine on his future assault rifle.
No, that's a shock. I think that's a Planet Side new conglomerate soldier carrying a shotgun, if I recall right.
Yes. So yeah, we've done a couple of these episodes before.
At least a few. Yeah,
kind of a classic computer magazine in review sort of thing. What was the last one we did? Was that issue 1 of Boot?
We did issue 1 of Boot. We did the April 2000 issue of Max PC, which had the Windows 2000 review in it, I think.
Yes, and a fantastic photo of you.
Yeah, we did. It's funny. I was talking the other day with a friend of the show, Adam Patrick Murray, over at PC World, about an old issue of Maximum PC, and it was one of the hey, we've done this for a long time issues, and there was a section in there that whoever arranged the section picked multiple. Like it was like, hey, here's the stuff we loved, here's the stuff we hated. And it was all stuff I had written, or a lot of it was stuff I had written. So like, they're like, man, I love this Clean Start issue. It's the best one you've ever done. That was one that I pitched to them as like, hey, you could do this thing where you just make an image and you can reset your Windows install anytime you want. Then the other one was the MP3 one, which I wrote a pretty sizable chunk of, which people freaking hated, man.
So you're saying that your work in print was a land of contrasts?
They both loved and hated me, Brad. But we are here to talk not about Maximum PC and stuff that I worked on directly, but PC Gamer, which, like I said, 260 pages. At that time, like our standard book size at Future was like 96 pages.
Jeez.
So a 260 page issue. And I think we did a 40% ad edit split at that point. So it would be 40% content, 60% ads once you got above 150 pages.
I thought that ratio was going to be reversed.
Well, no, it's just they're like the staffs were small. It was only like, even then it was 10 people, right? So 10 people making 200 pages a magazine, 150 pages a magazine was a lot. Because mainly it was hard on the designers, because you had to lay all the, like, even if you could come up with some real some real screenshot driven stories that didn't require a lot of writing, the designers still had to lay out. You still only had 2 designers to lay out a bazillion pages.
Was there much layout work involved with ads? I mean, I assume the ad showed up more or less ready to go, but like, was there still some amount of work?
Well, so
was it quite literally just slotting it in on the relevant page? So
we had the way we did it, and I assume this is the way most magazines worked. We had a production team that would there was an ad trafficking team that sold the ads. There was an ad sales team that sold the ads, an ad trafficking team that called the vendors and was like, hey, you have to send us a PDF today, or you're not going to be there's going to be a blank page that you paid for in the magazine.
Wow.
And then there was the production side that would take all of the ad PDFs and all of the PDFs that we gave them from the editorial, and they'd make sure that the color registration was right and all that stuff, and print them, and we'd proof we'd proof the whole thing.
Okay.
To make sure that like there was no offsets or anything weird. Like there was a bunch of stuff you looked for bad. Like even with PDFs where the page generation should be perfect every time, you'd still occasionally run the PDF generator and it would like cut off the last word on a sentence because it would push it down to the new line and there would be no space for the new line, stuff like that. So But yeah, we only looked at on the edit side. We only looked at the editorial. If I remember right, I don't remember ever looking at ads. I don't think in the proofing process. But like proofing a normal 100-page issue is like an hour and a half, 2-hour job usually, going through all 50, 60 pages. Proofing this monster was probably somebody's day, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Now this is the phenomenon that I was pretty well acquainted with also from the kind of console video game magazine side of the December issue of a given magazine, essentially just becoming a phone book every year.
Yeah, it was Vogue. There's a documentary about Vogue magazine called the October issue. It's a different industry, but it's the same idea, which is that's when the fashion ads hit for the year. So they have an extra big book, and maybe it's the September issue when I think about it. But anyway, the point is, it's sometime in the fall. Everybody buys a bunch of stuff. There's a crazy amount of stuff of words you have to make, and as a result, you get weird, really interesting magazines that, like, I'm sure that the PC Gamer staff, I'm sure they pulled people from other magazines that didn't have quite as much stuff going on that month, but like it was just a crazy amount. Like they were busting ass this entire time, I'm sure, to get this out.
Also, just to say it up front, so it doesn't get buried somewhere, this is PC Gamer Volume 7, Number 12, which is December 2000.
Yeah, it's issue 79. It's December of 2000. It has the cover story is Web World War. It's about massively multiplayer games. Yeah,
if you're counting from issue 1, it's 79. We'll post a link to archive.org in the show notes if you want to go download this issue yourself.
But it's fun to do this because it's like a trip back in time, really, in so many ways. And there's a lot of this, like the cover story is about upcoming MMOs, which at the time in 2000, MMOs were Ultima Online, EverQuest. There were, and then like MUDs and MUD adjacent things that never were really super commercially successful. And that was it.
Yes.
I guess Asheron's Call had come out by now. But we hadn't seen Dark Age of Camelot hadn't shipped yet. Shadowgate hadn't shipped yet. WoW, not even mentioned.
Yes.
It's a 40 page article and WoW doesn't get mentioned at all in here, which is incredible to me.
Yeah. Do you want to go straight to the cover story first? Since we kind of start
getting
into
if you want. If we start right there.
Yeah.
We're going to jump around a little bit I think the plan.
Yeah. Like looking at this thing in this list of like, here's these hot upcoming, do they even use the phrase massively multiplayer online game? I'm not sure that they do. Yeah, they do. Massively multiplayer game is a phrase used here, but it's like, here's PlanetSide. Here is Neverwinter Nights. Sorry, there's a lot of ads in here. Here's a game called Big World Citizen Zero. Did that game ever ship?
I don't ever remember seeing that game ship. Galactic Command Online. Big World Citizen Zero was like a weird cyberpunky thing that like I really don't think they ever shipped. So they have one of those good magazine boxes in here with each of these. It has like the most important facts for each one. And for this one, it's like, how many simultaneous players? 10 to 20,000.
Okay.
I love that optimism.
If you search Big World Citizen Zero in Google, a Giant Bomb wiki page is the first result.
Oh.
Which says that it was announced in 2000,
seems correct.
Tracks with this issue. Canceled in 2007.
Wow.
Development for 7 years, never came out.
That's a lot of money.
Project Entropia. There's another game listed here.
Vaguely remember that. I don't think that ever shipped either. There's a box. We talked about this a little bit before the show, but there's a box in here that's like, hey, here are the big brands that don't have MMOs announced or maybe have MMOs rumored that we don't really know anything about yet, or that wouldn't talk to us for this story, including Star Wars Online, which I guess eventually became Star Wars Galaxies, which was the first Star Wars MMO.
Yes.
Earth and Beyond. I don't remember what Earth and Beyond was, Brad. Do you remember what Earth and Beyond was?
I do not.
That was Westwood's MMO.
Oh, wow. I mean, we all know what happened to Westwood, unfortunately.
Yeah, it wasn't good. EverQuest 2, which was just a rumor. Star Trek Online, which wasn't a thing, and Activision just had the brand, the license.
Yeah, I mean, that did eventually become a game, but it's certainly not from Activision. Earth and Beyond did ship, apparently.
It seems familiar to me. The best part is that they talk about Star Trek Online. They talk about, which, like I said, didn't exist. They talked about D&D, which there was no MMO at that point. And they talked about Middle Earth because of these upcoming movies that are currently nearing completion in New Zealand. That's funny. They don't even mention Warcraft in here at all.
Yeah. I mean,
was probably an active development. Yeah.
Yeah. Warcraft 3 hadn't even shipped and wouldn't for probably, I think, about another 18 months after this. So, I mean, wow. Not even remotely a thing at this point, but like looking through this, I mean, the two, well, there's three. The two that jump out at me are Anarchy Online and Dark Age of Camelot as MMOs that like actually hit and really did something. And then PlanetSide also. PlanetSide was kind of a big deal.
Yeah. It had problems, but it was a neat game. It was a first person shooter MMO with a bunch of vehicles, but in a time when I guess Battlefield 1942 probably came out around the same time. It had vehicles as well, but vehicles were really novel in a large scale first person combat game.
For sure. Like Battlefield had them, PlanetSide had them, like the original version. Well, Halo, the shipping version of Halo also had vehicles, but you remember Halo originally was announced as basically a PlanetSide or 1942 looking multiplayer game.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think on this, how many simultaneous players thing, I get the feeling that like they asked the people how many players they were going to have. And everybody just made up a number that they were trying to guess what the biggest number would be and do slightly bigger than that.
Sure.
Like it's nuts.
I mean, so much of video game development was just like grabbing the seat of your pants at this time, right? I mean, like 3D graphics were not that old. Like online multiplayer was not that old. Like this is such a primitive period in a lot of ways.
Yeah, these games were designed to be played on modems for the most part.
Yeah,
right. Like they like you EverQuest worked on a dial-up modem, on a 14.4 modem. You had all of this stuff. Like PlanetSide, we call it a first-person shooter, but it was a first-person shooter in the same way that like Mass Effect 1 was, in that you were rolling for hits on each bullet that was shot. So like there was an accuracy component that was based on how your aim was, but it still was there was still dice involved. Neverwinter Nights is in this as an MMO, which is interesting because they were claiming at the time, and I don't know if this ship because I never really played Neverwinter Nights, but there would be a character vault where you'd check out your character when you started a session and then you'd check it back in at the end, and it would like do the sniff test on if you'd done some weird power leveling bullshit. It was a wild time for multiplayer games.
Yes, for sure. Neverwinter Nights came out as not an MMO, right?
Yeah, it came out as like I feel like it had an online component. You could play with each other. You could play with friends, but I don't think it was persistent. Like you couldn't run a server from Neverwinter Nights that had your campaign going in it or whatever.
Right. Big world of Citizen Zero.
Yeah, that's a good one. This dark, the big takeaway from this whole, so I mean, this was a time when a lot of people were running voodoo cards still, right? You maybe had a dedicated 3D card in addition to a voodoo card, but like we were just seeing Geforce 2s hit the market around this time, and it was the time when you were like, should I run this in the glide mode because it's going to be really fast at like 800 by 600, or should I run it in I can run it in a window on my TNT2 or my Geforce, and that will be a little bit faster.
Yeah, there's an ad in here on page, looks like about 10 in the print magazine. A co-marketing ad for both Baldur's Gate 2 and the Geforce 2 Ultra, which is kind of a weird pairing to me. Yeah, I don't know. The Baldur's Gate 2 was the most demanding 3D game, but
was it 3D at all?
I'm sure it had some 3D elements, but here they refer to the Geforce 2 Ultra as the world's fastest GPU right here.
The other thing that struck me. The other thing that was funny about this MMO article before we moved on is everybody was treating EverQuest like it was the peak that the market was ever going to be. They were talking about getting hundreds of thousands of players,
man,
and making tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And like the angle that everybody was taking was, man, people who like to play EverQuest are so okay. For people who don't know, EverQuest was the first of the 3D MMOs. It was built for Glide originally, 3D, really, really low poly by today's standards. Like a character model had like 400 polys or something on it. Looked like Quake, but you could get 100 people in an area and you could walk around towns, and it was big and the servers were persistent. It was also absolutely punishing because they didn't have any kind of in-game UI really at all. There were no maps. There was no quest log. There was no like the spells didn't tell you what they did, so you had to figure it out through trial and error.
Was that intentional? That was not.
That was intentional.
That was not just an onboarding oversight. Was that some kind of like eldritch mysticism thing of like, oh no, you're gonna have to read the spell book and figure out the arcane arts for yourself.
They build all of this as if you have to earn it, then it's going to feel better. Like this was like Brad McQuaid's main theory of the game was if you suffer to do this, then it'll be more rewarding in the end.
It's like on the one hand, I get where he's coming from. Like there is something to that idea. On the other hand, in a reality where everyone has a finite amount of time on the earth, I question the value of taking it as far as they did. Like I always knew of EverQuest as the MMO where you actually lost XP when you died.
Oh yeah, you lost XP. You could lose all of your gear.
Right.
There were hell levels where every 5 or 7 levels or something, you basically had to get as much XP as you'd gotten to get to that level again. Like which just forced you to always be grinding up. The first 10 levels were the hardest levels in the game because you had no gear, you had no weapons, you were just punching rats for hours and hours and hours until you'd get a level up. And of course, like the takeaway on this is that WoW came out 3 years later and just absolutely cleaned up because they made a game that was pleasant to play and that normal human beings could play.
Yeah. Yes, they made EverQuest with all the rough stuff sanded down and with that kind of Blizzard style of personality and polish at the time, and then produced a player base orders of magnitude bigger than EverQuest.
Yeah, so it's just like in the greater context, in the context of what we know now, looking back on this, this article is hysterical because it's like everybody missed the point and all of these people got their asses kicked basically.
Yeah, with like a couple of exceptions, like we said, but it was such a Wild West situation that it's hard to fault anybody for not knowing what they were doing.
Yep.
You flagged this, I guess we'll call out some ads here and there. You flagged this classic Harman Kardon speaker set on page 5.
It's funny because it's the clear speakers. It's the my PDF viewer is loading very slowly right now.
Yeah, it's funny because I've certainly never owned these. I don't know if I have even seen them in person, but I knew them instantly when you mentioned them. It's the really spacey looking, like very iMac style of the day, like clear plastic glass looking kind of thing.
They're called sound sticks is what the name was. And it is clear plastic. There's a subwoofer that's all clear. So you can see the guts inside for the subwoofer and the speaker, and you can see the tube that makes the bass and the whole thing. But it's an ad. It's essentially an ad for Mac speakers on page 5 of PC Gamer, which I think is really hysterical because I'm sure that they reviewed them at some point for PC Gamer. And I can't imagine that they got a good review. But they were the speakers you got when you bought iMac speakers for an iMac for a long time, because Johnny Ive really liked them. So that cracks me up.
Apparently Harman Kardon making a version of the sound sticks to this day.
It's award-winning design. It is literally an award-winning design.
Yeah, you can get the Sound Sticks 4 set for $300 right now. Still look kind of silly.
The magazine came with a disc, and our friend of the show, Jeremy Williams, called out in the column for it that everything on the disc is a 3D game. Oh,
what page is this?
This is page 8 of the magazine.
I didn't think to look that up. That is something we absolutely should discuss. Oh, yes.
So it's like the demos are NHL 2001, Homeworld Cataclysm, which was kind of the sequel / expanded mission pack for Homeworld, Delta Force Land Warrior, Dark Reign 2, Reach for the Stars, 4x4 Evolution, which was like a Colin McRae rally type thing, and Nolf, No One Lives Forever, and Panzer General 3 Scorched Earth.
No One Lives Forever is so good.
No One Lives Forever it is a tragedy that game is lost to IP hell.
Especially Nolf 2. What became of that franchise is indeed a tragedy. This like looking at this intro for this disc is like kind of an interesting case study in how long it takes for like breakthrough technology to like truly penetrate the market in 3D cards in this case.
Yep.
Like he literally flat out starts here. If you don't have a 3D accelerator yet, there are plenty of classics waiting in the bargain bin. So I guess we're like, this is just about exactly 4 years since Jailquake, which certainly to me is like the big breakthrough 3D game on PC that drove actual 3D hardware. So like 4-ish years here where he's basically saying like, all right, get with the times if you haven't already.
And this is the time when if you bought a PC, there weren't really integrated graphics yet. So like you had to get a graphics card in when you bought an HP or something. And the worst case would be that it has like an S3, which didn't really do a lot of 3D stuff. The best case is you'd get a Riva 128 or a TNT2 or a Geforce or a Rage Pro or something like that. It was a weird time though.
Yeah, indeed. Majestic is in here.
Did you ever play Majestic? Did you experience?
No, I heard plenty of tales about it. Like it was kind of legendary for the kind of insane things that it did.
Yeah, so Majestic was an EA kind of real world game. It was kind of part video game. It's a subscription service that you could sign up for, and you would be part of an ongoing story that there was no like Majestic app that you ran on your computer. You basically signed up for this thing on a website and you put in your, I think AIM, maybe, or ICQ, yes. Probably AIM.
It was AIM. Like. There are some screenshots of AOL Instant Messenger in here.
Yeah. AIM, your email address, your phone number, and your fax machine. Cause we all had fax machines back in 2000. And like this ongoing story would unfold in like you would, it was like an ARG where you were an active participant in the alternate reality game. The game would text you. You could say, hey, don't text me at 3:00 in the morning because I don't want to freak out my spouse or whatever, because we didn't have nighttime mode on our phones at that point. And most of us probably didn't have most of us only had landlines. I think at one point it called and freaked out my wife. Because like you'd get breathy calls at 1:00 in the morning if you didn't tell it not to do that. You'd get a lot of IMs from people. People would be like, hey, I need you to check this document. Can you go find it? I think it's on the server. And then you'd log into the server with the credentials they gave you and you'd download something and you'd send it back to them. And it lasted like 4 months, I think, after it came out. But there's a preview of that here.
I guess I shouldn't be surprised that it only lasted 4 months. Like everything that you have just described sounds kind of inherently unsustainable.
It's one of those things that like if you had a phone app and you were participating in it through a phone app, it feels like it would be much more manageable than it was calling and faxing and emailing you all the time.
Yeah, so you're totally right about that. Like that's how you would do a thing like this these days. You would just ship your own app, right, that handled it. But that really reveals the facade though, right? Like that you have to create this conduit for people to experience this like living story. Like what seems so ambitious and bold about this thing is the fact that it used your existing communications channels to get to you, you know? I know you give them over willingly, like, it's coming, but still the idea of getting, because like we use AOL Instant Messenger for work. I don't know about you guys, but
we did. Yeah.
At GameSpot, we used it constantly for work stuff. So the idea of getting these clandestine messages from some shadowy operative right there in AIM or emails or fax, you know what I mean? Like just having that stuff in line with your real life sounds like super exciting to me.
It was a trip. I think the place it fell down for me was the story was all about aliens and like Majestic 12.
Sure.
Yeah, it was post X-Files conspiracy theory stuff. It just wasn't. It wasn't written. Like the performances were fine, but the writing wasn't great. And I feel like they were going to have a hard time keeping up with the story, like in an ongoing way. It seemed like they were on a content treadmill that was probably unsustainable long term.
Yeah, that's not surprising.
Also, today, if I signed up for this and I gave them my phone number and I started getting random phone calls from random numbers, they would just go straight to voicemail and I'd never ever pick that up. So
that is a very good point that this kind of wouldn't work in today's context.
Yeah, sadly.
Still a very cool idea though.
The idea was cooler than the execution, I will say.
Yes.
Is the unfortunate thing.
Actually, we could have tied this in with the other MMO stuff. There is a separate little news piece here. I think you've got more experience with this than I do. Of Variant, who the company that would become Sony Online Entertainment after Sony bought them. Variant, the developer of EverQuest, viciously smacking down this EverQuest macros program. Did you ever use this?
No, I never used it. because they ban you for using it. So this is a situation. The framing on the article in PC Gamer is interesting because they put it as like hey, they're going after modders, but it was kind of a paid thing. The weird thing about it is that EQ macros basically let you do things that you can do with pretty much every programmable keyboard in the world now, just to have a timing based macros for like repetitive tasks. It also added the quality of life stuff that made WoW playable. Like it added a compass and a map and a quest log, and I think there's an overlay browser that you could pop up to search for stuff on the web if you wanted to look something up. And it explicitly says, Varant downloaded a copy, installed it. Like 2 hours later, they got a nasty gram from the lawyers saying, hey, you got to stop selling this. This is illegal software. You're breaking our terms of services. And that was pretty much it. That was the end of it. But it's all the stuff that was in WoW and Dark Age and the later MMOs that made those games accessible and playable. I don't think EQ had a map in game for another 5 years after this. Probably
that's insane. That is completely insane.
Yeah, you just had to know where to go, man. You printed out the maps and then you stuck them up above your computer, and you knew the path through Lower Guck to get to the Yakesha spawn, which meant you had to like run and turn right and then turn left, and then you drop down over a bridge and swam a little bit, and then if you ran out of stamina before you got to the next ledge, then you drown. You have to go back and get all your crap later. It was a real pain.
Spoken like somebody who very nearly lost their mind about 23 years ago.
I played a lot of EverQuest.
I mean, that does, again, go to the thing we were talking about before. Like, there's something kind of Dark Souls-esque, though, about not having an in-game guide and having to learn things like that from other players. Like that, I mean, that is cool in concept, as unworkable as it usually tends to be, though.
I mean, if you talk to somebody who played a lot of EverQuest, and ask them, depending on what character they played, they'll have a better understanding of some areas of that world than they probably do the town that they've lived in for the last 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, you may have touched on this a little bit, but like this seems so incredibly short-sighted in light of how open to mods WoW was when it came out. Like WoW UI mods are a very non-trivial part of WoW's success, right? The fact that players could extend the interface of WoW.
The fact that your healers would have a great big on-screen pop-up that said "Fire Heal 1 now"
yes.
during raids.
Right.
Like, yeah. Like the fact that EQ had this guy who wrote the software for them for free that gave them the tools that would have made their game more accessible to normal human beings. And they chose to tell them to fuck off instead of just buying them and making them part of the team. Right. is really telling.
Or even taking that as a cue that like, hey, maybe we should open this thing up more and let people do more with it. I mean, it is a fine line between sort of kosher player assists and straight up cheating. Like I get being a little skittish about walking that line, but
well, I mean, so the thing, this is the part of the problem with EverQuest is that it came from a world of like mud developers and you know, people who were building text-based games that were multiplayer and were really, really intentionally very difficult. And that, I think that focus on difficulty skewed their entire perspective on what these games could be and limited the audience as a result.
Sure.
This isn't a hot take, by the way. This is pretty well established at this point. What else we got? There's
got this editorial. Well, it's not an editorial. It's kind of more of a report called "The Incredible Shrinking PC Box."
Yeah, this is, of all the things, this seemed like such a big deal then, and then it only mattered for like 5 years.
Yeah, did it? Because I'm thinking back to, so like PC game boxes used to be huge.
Really, really large.
Right up until around this time. And this apparently, I guess I didn't realize at the time, this was an actual effort between the IEMA, which I've always wondered what that was, the Interactive Entertainment Merchant Association. Because I've seen that acronym many times. Between them and like a bunch of, or not a bunch, but some big publishers like Activision and Infogrames to shrink PC boxes.
This is on page 47, by the way.
On page 47. Like there was, right around this time, if you were buying PC games in a store like I was, like you saw all the PC boxes shrink down to this like, I guess I would describe as like kind of a large paperback size box shape. Would you say
it is a DVD case that's 3D DVD cases thick?
Oh, does it actually match the footprint of a?
Yeah, it matches the footprint of a DVD case.
I never realized that. I mean, that obviously makes sense.
So like, it's funny the way they present this. My understanding was because Walmart said, hey, we're not going to carry big PC boxes anymore. If you want to have PC, like, this was during a time when it was hard to get PC games stocked in big box stores and retail, like mass market retail stores. So the feeling I always had was that they had to do this if they wanted stuff to continue being placed there. And that Deer Hunter and Cabela's Big Game and all of those games that were selling enormous volumes at Walmart and like more traditional retail stores were shrinking so they could get more space in the space that they'd purchased inside the stores.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing to me is that they have quotes from a bunch of different people, from people at Microsoft and Activision, a bunch of different places. And they're all really gung-ho about the smaller packaging size, while at the same time saying, hey, the smaller packaging is the amount of money you spend on packaging and distribution versus product development is nil. So it's not going to like you're going to save money on games because of the smaller boxes. It's just that literally they can fit more titles onto the same amount of shelf space at the stores. So therefore everybody will sell more copies as a result, I think was the theory.
Yeah. And, it's the PlayStation 2 had just come out probably around the time this issue went to press. The GameCube and Xbox were not that far off. Like, they straight up cite in here, like, hey, the shelves are getting crowded at retail with these extremely popular new consoles coming out.
Yeah.
PC game boxes were absurdly big for what was in there.
Well,
unless it was like a Falcon 4.0 with a phone. Well, of course, in that case, the phone book size manual didn't even fit in the box, but like generally it was like a modest manual and a CD around this time, right?
I mean, it wasn't very much after this that you would get a flap that would fit inside the CD case and a big bunch of cardboard that kept the CD from flapping around inside there. And then a mailer that let you send off to join the fan club or get your warranty or some nonsense. I like the quote from Microsoft, which says, Microsoft believes a standard size package would be good for the industry, but we don't necessarily think it's a DVD size box. Microsoft prefers a box that has more room for manuals and other extras. Mm-hmm. When in fact, Microsoft never shipped another extra again.
Yeah.
Do you miss those? Do you miss all the stuff that used to come in the boxes? Do you miss the steel cases and all that nonsense?
I really need to go through my parents' basement because I'm pretty sure I've still got a lot of old video game boxes down there in their very large cavernous basement.
I think the only one I bought that I was really excited about was the Quake 3 tin copy.
I definitely still have the metal Quake 3 box down there somewhere. I'm pretty sure I've also got the really weird askew Gabriel Knight box. It was like kind of a two triangles sort of bolted together, if you remember what that looked like.
I bought Wing Commander 3 and it came in a film reel.
Wow.
With a t-shirt.
Huh. Interesting.
I bought that. I bought that one literally because it was the one that they had on sale at Sam's Club, and it was like the same price as the one at the other place in town.
Yeah,
and I was at Sam's Club.
It's also interesting to see the evolution of PC retail here because we're really not that many years out from the beginnings of the declarations of the death of PC gaming.
It had happened by then. Like we were hearing about it by end of 2000.
Right. Like remember right before Steam or around the time Steam came about, people were essentially declaring the PC to be a dead platform.
Well, and there are ads for Electronics Boutique in here when it was about to go, like it was about to get absorbed by GameSpot or whoever ended up buying EB. And also we're 3 years from Steam kind of quietly rolling out, and then 5 from Steam being the only way you could get PC games at that point.
Sure.
Like this box initiative it wasn't too long before these new, smaller, more efficient PC boxes would just be a thing with a CD in that it pre-installs a Steam download. Yes. So you didn't have to download the whole thing. Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
Weird time. Yes. On the next page, they have this PCG release meter, and I look at this and I see, oh, look, there's 4 columns: title, publisher, date, and prognosis. Title, publisher, date, really useful information. The prognosis, living hell to produce for the staff.
Really?
Well, because they each one is cheeky.
Oh, sure. Yes.
Right. So it's not like, this is going to happen. No, it's not. Everyone has to be clever in addition to like have a little bit of a take. And there's like 30 of them. So this is some poor bastard sat here and just was like, okay, I need a pun for the Settlers 4 settling in soon.
a game called Sheep from a company called Empire, which is coming out about now.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yes.
Really terrible.
Magazines.
Magazines were weird, man. I miss magazines.
Yeah.
Not so much I want to go work at one.
Yes. Do you want to talk about the gift guide a little bit since we're in the holidays window here? Of course, there's a gift guide with such hits as the Creative Nomad Jukebox.
What page is this on, Bren?
That is page 119.
I hate gift guides. Can I just say that?
I don't know if I've never participated in one, although every year since I have been doing this, you get a bunch of emails from PR reps saying like, hey, if you're doing a gift guide, you might want to consider these.
Do you know who loves gift guides?
Who loves gift guides?
PR reps.
Yeah, I can see it. I get it. Look, they have a product that came out as much as 11 months ago. It's a chance to get it back in the news again.
Well, and it's like the dads and grads. Like there are several things that land every year.
Dads and grads
that people love to make features around because there's a lot of potential advertising revenue. Mm-hmm. Dads and grads and holiday gift guides are both them. This is especially funny because this holiday gift guide, this magazine would have come out in probably like late September or early October at the absolute latest. So that means that this holiday gift guide doesn't have whatever actually came out in October or November that people were interested in.
Sure.
This is a pretty good holiday. Okay. So saying I hate gift guides because often they're just an excuse for people to call shit in that they want to fuck around with and then send back and not have to pay for it with their own money. This one doesn't have a whole lot of that, which is nice. And this also has the real vibe of oh shit, they sold another 30 pages of ads. We got to come up with something real fast.
Sure.
And they went to the mall and did a photo shoot where they acted like they were stealing stuff from the mall. And like that's a good afternoon right there. You hit the food court, get lunch, shoot a feature photo shoot, and call it a day.
It's the magazine life. I was always jealous.
We spent a lot of time making weird photo shoots. I will say that.
I can see that. Not one, but two MP3 players in here.
So I had that Nomad. That was a good ass MP3 player up until the iPod came out, and you were like, "Wow, this is." That seems like it'd be easier to find your music on.
Mm-hmm. You said you wanted to call out the Microsoft Sidewinder Strategic Commander.
Do you know what this thing is?
No, I haven't. I mean, it looks like a mouse, but apparently it is something very different.
Okay, so imagine you were really into RTS games and top-down games, mm-hmm. and imagine you had a device that rested your left hand on that was like a mouse, but for scrolling around the world. Okay. So you could bind that top thing with the buttons. So it looks like a mouse, except for the bottom part of it stayed fixed on the desk, and the top part of it was like a slider. So it would slide on two X and Y axes. And then it had, I think, 8 or 10 buttons on the top and a scroll wheel and a couple of thumb buttons. So you could like put your selection macros and stuff on the buttons on the top. You have 2 levels of those. You can make new ones and trigger the ones that you've recorded. You could slide that thing around so you could scroll around your screen real fast. And then StarCraft came out and it immediately didn't have enough buttons for all the macros that people did and all the micro stuff that people did. And I think the only thing that really ever supported it super good were the Microsoft strategy games like Rise of Nations or Rise of Nations, right? And Age of Empires. Yeah.
Look, I get it. Like, to this day, I'm sitting here trying to program little macros on this Logitech. So
I just look at it because it had so much plastic, so much injection molded plastic, and each of those molds probably cost $150,000 to make at the scale they made this thing. And what was Microsoft? They spent so much money on this hardware business, and none of it worked until the Xbox 360. I mean, maybe they couldn't have gotten to the Xbox 360 gamepad without doing all this other stuff. Maybe that's the takeaway.
Like Microsoft hardware took some swings, let's say.
Now, see, I wouldn't have let them put that Microsoft Sidewinder Force Feedback 2 ad directly across from the Strategic Commander on the page. That's one of the things we looked at when we were proofing at the end of the day. We'd switch the ads around occasionally if they were if it was too close to something that was the same publisher, same company, whatever. I
wouldn't have noticed that till you pointed it out, but it is a bit conspicuous.
Yeah.
Like, what's even more conspicuous is that page 121 is a Sidewinder Force Feedback 2 ad.
Yeah.
on 125 is the Sidewinder Force Feedback 2 recommended as part of this gift guide.
Well, now I will tell you that is probably like the reason I wouldn't have let it happen is because this was an accident, right? We wouldn't have known what was in the ads at all. Fair.
Yeah, like GameSpot was the same way. Like we were supposed to very strictly have no idea what was going on with ad sales and placement and everything.
Yeah, so we would swap so we would literally move the ads around if it looked too shady. So I would have probably disallowed that Sidewinder ad from being in the middle of this article if they hadn't sold it as being in the thing, and if there was time, I probably would have cut it from the product list if they couldn't kill the ad.
Yeah,
if they couldn't move the ad.
That's fair. Let's see. You'll talk about Star Trek Voyager Elite Force.
God, that was an incredible video game.
The premiere review of the month here.
Yeah, PC Gamer would always pick. Hold on, before we do that, can we call out the ad? Talk about what a better time we are on page 132. There's an ad for Unreal Tournament Game of the Year edition.
Oh, mm-hmm. Sure.
It looks like it's a X-ray of a skeleton, and it says our new Game of the Year edition requires some special equipment, and in between the skeleton's legs are two enormous metal balls.
Yes, like cannonballs, let's say.
They look like small cannonballs. Yeah, it's a bit much.
Kind of an era when balls of steel passed for a joke.
Yeah, that was clever. Anyway, yeah. So the lead review, Star Trek Voyager. This was like their featured review. They were saying this is our favorite game this month, basically.
Yes, despite spending probably the first 3 paragraphs at least saying like, yeah, we get it. It's a Star Trek game, but actually trust us. It's amazing.
But I mean, remember at this point, licensed games were bad except for an occasional Star Wars game.
Mm-hmm. Star Trek games in particular, maybe not the best pedigree.
A lot of adventure games that were kind of iffy.
25th anniversaries, God, there's something to it. I don't know.
That was after this though, wasn't it?
No, that was before. That was Square in the 90s VGA point and click craze. Yeah, that sounds about right.
And we also have the Riker Plays Poker one or whatever that game was.
That was just Jonathan Frakes on his own.
Oh, okay.
Making awful faces into a poker camera. Elite Force is a Quake 3 engine game if people haven't played it.
Yeah.
So it's basically just a shooter with Star Trek skins on it. But it was very good.
But you were like a squad. So it was a squad game, and you had bots that played. There were bots that came along with you, and they managed to make that work in a way that wasn't annoying, unlike every other game that tried that up until this point.
Yeah, I'm selling it short actually, because it's been ages since I played it, but like there are some non-combat story sequences on the ship as well, right? Like I think part of the appeal was like a little bit of wish fulfillment if you get to walk around on a starship and use the transporter, and
yeah, they did the stuff that made it feel like Star Trek. And I mean, the one knock against it, I think, is that all of the away missions are shooty away missions, and there were no Darmok style, let's go chat with people for a while away missions. Definitely
still a shooter, definitely still a Quake engine game, but
also they made a bunch of guns that just felt like reskins of Quake guns.
Mm-hmm.
But it was fun. You could phaser people, they'd disappear. I mean, it worked out okay. Yes. There was Deathmatch too, as I recall.
Probably one of Raven's last games as a studio before they just started making. Well,
I think they made Elite Force 2.
Yeah, I don't know for sure if they made, and Elite Force 2 got made. Yes, I don't know if Raven did it. They probably did, but I think they were making their own games for probably another decade or so after this. Before they
because they made the last thing they made was that Russian time travel game,
Singularity, which is great, or was. I always bring this up because I loved Raven back in the day, and it's a bummer. It was always a bummer to me that they kind of stopped making their own games.
Hexen was a hell of a game.
Yeah.
Heretic 2, also a hell of a game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because so there's a bunch of places in this magazine. It's the thing that we did at Future, where the editorial team could talk about things that they liked about stuff and what they were doing that month and things like that. And the 2 things that they talked about this month were Star Trek Elite Force and the firearms mod for Half-Life, which was basically like, it was in that first wave of mods that were really successful, like a Day of Defeat and Counter-Strike. I think it was pre-Day of Defeat, post Counter-Strike, post TFC probably. And it was like a push-pull, but it was all real guns. And it was like an insane number of guns, as I remember. And like all the maps were like 7 capture points long, and one team started at one end and one team started at the other, and you literally would just fight up and down this corridor shaped battlefield until you got all the way back to one person's space or all the way forward to the others.
That sounds fun.
It was good. It's a good mod.
Let's see. There's a review of Metal Gear Solid for Windows in here.
I can't imagine that they liked that very much.
I give it a 79%.
That's better than I would have expected.
It sounds like it's functional. It sounds like it ran at higher resolution, but otherwise it's just a PlayStation game. They didn't do anything to textures or anything like that, which is their big complaint. No force feedback support, but of course, controller stuff was not exactly standardized at this point. It
was an unfortunate time for this game to come out, kind of, because like this. When did it come out for the PlayStation? It been 3 or 4 years old. Yeah, 2 or 3 years old.
98. It was a couple of years old at this point. So
I was going to say the other thing that's weird about this game is that the dev cycle. When they talk about games taking a long time to come out, they're talking about a 2-year dev cycle.
Yes,
which is hilarious now.
Very quaint. A lot of the stuff's very quaint. One thing I'll mention: if anybody listening has played MGS on Windows, I want to know. They mentioned it here specifically the Psycho Mantis fight from PlayStation, where you have to, famously unplug your controller, put it in port 2.
Wait, really?
Oh yeah. Oh, wait.
I didn't have a PlayStation, dude.
You never played Metal Gear Solid on the? Oh my god.
Okay. I'm going to go and tell you this has happened once before, Brad.
Oh no, I was literally about to say this is another Aerith situation.
I've never played any Metal Gears except for the very first one on the NES.
I mean, look.
Oh no, that's not true. I played Ground Zeroes. No. What's the one that was like the demo before?
Ground Zero. Yes, Ground Zeroes is the kind of short prelude.
Yeah, that was fine. I played a little bit of 4, but I got to the guy that was pooping his pants all the time. I was like, this isn't for me.
It's Metal Gear. That'll happen. Yeah. Well, you never played Phantom Pain?
Never played any of them. I played I played the corridor of Phantom Pain like 4 times, where you walk down that long ass corridor and
you have to get
just like, this is boring.
You should get to the open world. If you like stealth games, if you like sandboxy stealth games, like you should play the Phantom Pain. It's so good.
Okay.
I genuinely think it is the best stealth sandbox ever made.
Okay.
It's fantastic. The thing I was going to say here, I'm sorry, man. It was literally over 25 years ago now.
Spoiling some stuff.
When you fight Psycho Mantis, who is the kind of clairvoyant or psycho, oh my god, like telepathic, I guess I should say, member of the elite commando squad you're fighting. In that fight, he basically takes control away, and he doesn't really say this exactly, but you have to figure out that you have to plug into controller port 2 to get control back.
Wow. Could you do that without jacking up your controllers on the PlayStation?
Oh yeah, it was
the PC. You could have fried something with the game, because you were still using the MIDI port on the game card.
No, this was, the custom controller ports.
Yeah,
also,
I know.
I don't think there was any negotiation going on with controllers back in those days. Like if it was in the port, it was working.
That makes sense.
Anyway, that was a cool gimmick. There was another part where he read some of the save files on your memory card and commented on the other games you'd been playing.
Wait, really?
Yes. It was mind-blowing. Both of those things were fucking mind-blowing at the time. Anyway, this reviewer calls out that while those things obviously can't be in this game for technical reasons, they came up with a PC equivalent of those gimmicks. And I really want to know. This was translated to the PC without the need to unplug your controller. I won't give away the secret, but I must applaud Microsoft on a job well done. I really want to know what they came up with to replace those gimmicks.
This is like black and white, looking at your Outlook file and pulling names of people that you emailed for your villagers.
Did it really do that?
Yeah, scraped your Outlook file.
Oh, that's wild. It's maybe a little invasive.
I mean, in these days, we would probably have a problem with that. But back then we were like, man, that is fucking cool.
I mean, I would have thought that was very cool at the time. But reading your save files from other games is one thing. But looking at your email is...
Well, but also the game wasn't connected to the internet in any way that was appreciable. So it was like it all lived inside the sandbox, I guess.
Look, do you trust Peter Molyneux with your Rolodex?
Not anymore. Not after what he did to that kid.
Yeah. Anyway.
Milo. Poor Milo.
Crimson
Skies is in this. In this.
I know. Speaking of games I've never played.
Really?
One. Yeah.
Oh, that's a banger. It's a really good game, Brad. Have you never played any of them, or did you just not play the original one?
None of them.
The one for Xbox 360, I think. There was an early Xbox Live one that was quite good.
Oh, is this not that? I mean, this is a year before the Xbox came out, so I guess it couldn't be. I didn't realize there was a different Crimson Skies on PC before that.
Crimson Skies, like many great Xbox franchises, was originally a personal computer video game.
I did not know that. That's wild.
Yeah, this one, look, the infrastructure for online multiplayer was not what you wanted back then.
Fair.
It was pretty good when it came out on the Xbox version's superior.
Yes.
The giant Citizen Kabuto ads just before the Metal Gear Solid review, man, that was a high ambition game that completely fizzled.
I don't think I ever played that or could really even tell you what it was about. I certainly remember the name.
It was like a three faction game where there were like monsters and mermaid ladies and like alien spacesuit guys, Halo men.
Sure.
And you had to look, I think you interacted with each other mostly with shooting, but I don't remember specifics.
Dude, that's a 7-page ad.
It was not very good.
That's a 7-page ad.
How do you think? Look, you don't get to a 260-page book without a few 7-page ads.
That's fair. I mean, there's another ocean of ads between the game reviews and the Greg Viederman tech section. Because of course we need to look at the hardware of the day.
There were also like 20 game reviews here. Like it's a lot of game reviews.
Yeah, I mean this thing's not all ads. It's just the ads are quite substantial. But anyway, what do we have in the hardware section here? So they actually leads with some Dell laptops of all things.
Laptops are exciting. You can play games on laptops at this point.
Yeah,
this was the last wave of laptops before they shipped those XPS machines, those big chunky XPS machines.
Okay, let's see. What do we got for graphics in these things? They're all ATI Rage Mobility 128.
That would have been it. That's a Rage Sub-Rage Pro GPU probably.
I'm going to assume those were not especially capable.
The Quake 3 numbers were 28 frames per second at 640 by 480.
Oof.
32-bit color though.
That's
if you did 16-bit color, you'd double your frame rate basically.
Okay, all right, that's something.
That's a trip.
That's something. It was probably enough to play your Warcrafts and so forth.
I think these would have been like Warcraft and Red Command and Conquer Red Alert machines,
like Diablo, stuff like that.
Diablo probably would have been fine.
Yeah.
The Sidewinder Force Feedback 2 makes another appearance.
Weird. Huh. It's funny how it just keeps popping up everywhere.
It is a really good. It was arguably the best joystick of the era. I think
that's fine. So I believe it. Below that, this is page 190. I was surprised. So we mentioned the Geforce 2 Ultra is being advertised in this magazine. Here is a review of the Creative Labs Annihilator 2 Ultra.
Yeah,
I don't know how I had completely forgotten that Creative Labs made graphics cards. What happened to that? So
my 3DFX Voodoo card was by Diamond Multimedia, but my Voodoo 2 was a Creative Labs card.
Interesting.
That I believe it had a serial number that was like 000032 or something like that. Yeah, I got rid of it a few years ago. But
actually, were those sold under the 3D Blaster name, or was 3D Blaster something else?
3D Blaster it wasn't an ATI card. It was a different. I want to say that was a Verge card, but I can't remember. It was called the Voodoo something.
Maybe you're right. I'm trying to find
Voodoo Blaster or something.
It's surprisingly hard to find info.
Yeah, pre-Google stuff is hard to find. It turns out
on stuff like that at this point. Actually,
the Annihilator 2 Ultra was a Geforce 2, but this was the end of Creative Labs being in graphics pretty much. Like they stopped around before Geforce 3 came out. They weren't really making GPUs.
I wonder, do you have any idea why? Because this was probably too early for them to see the end of sound cards coming. I mean, sound cards aren't totally done, but
as sound cards.
As the mass mainstream business that sustained them for so long, this was probably a little too early for them to see that coming to an end.
My guess is that it was too expensive for the margins that they were getting out of it.
Sure. Shit. That's essentially the reason that EVGA cited last year when they got out of GPUs.
Yeah, if you look at it, this was around the time they bought Cambridge Soundworks and started making speakers, and I bet that the margins on speakers were really, really good, and the margins on video cards were really, really bad. And you could sell a pair of speakers for 4 years.
Sure.
And you could sell a video card for about 9 months.
Yes. Indeed.
And the product development was probably about the same.
It's funny.
How much did that card sold for? $500 US.
Wait, did it really?
Yeah, it was the Ultra one.
But that is like the absolute top of the line graphics card at this time.
That was that was probably the fastest thing you could get, and it was
the
DDR.
The ad said the world's fastest graphics.
I think it's DDR RAM, which was brand new at the time.
Yes. So remember the GeForce One shipped a version with DDR,
but it was late. That was like their mid refresh.
Yeah, the original GeForce shipped with SDR memory, and then a DDR version came later.
Yeah, the DDR GeForces were the first video cards I reviewed at Maximum PC.
I got on a weird bad cycle with NVIDIA cards where I was always buying the early gen version of stuff back then. Oof. So I never owned a GeForce 2. I had a TNT.
Okay.
I had a TNT and never got a TNT 2. I bought a GeForce 1 SDR.
You wanted a TI when you got to those GeForce 3s,
so
GeForce 4s.
I had a GeForce 1 SDR, never got a DDR version or a GeForce 2. Or any of that stuff, or a GeForce 3. I didn't get another card until the GeForce 4. Anyway,
yeah, it was a weird time.
Yeah, so there's one. Viderman's got like a Q&A here. With
Q&A. Look, if you needed to pad out a few pages of the magazine, Q&A was always a good way to do it.
It's like glorified tech support, basically. People just writing in with questions and problems about PCs.
Yep.
But I have to read this first question because it was just a lot of parallels to now. Question from Joe Craw. I've been building myself a budget gaming system in my spare time, and I need to pick up a video card. I'm trying to decide between NVIDIA's GeForce 2 MX and 3DFX's Voodoo 4. Both of these cards can be purchased for around $150, but I've not been able to find any articles comparing the two. I mean, I know he said budget here. Those are not top of the line, but still the idea of competitive graphics cards for $150.
Well, they were those. Just to be clear, those would have been probably 640 by 480 or 800 by 600 GPUs at that point.
These are obviously not top of the line, but still, like just the idea of any GPU for 150. I mean, I know like the Intel Arc cards and like some of the lower end AMD stuff now is trying to sort of recapture that price territory.
Yeah,
but still, like the idea of the most expensive GPU on the market being $499 and your average card being 150 to 200.
Well, I mean,
so quaint.
They were 400. That was the case until probably the 1080, right? Or 980, something like that. It's not
actually. I think you're right. Actually,
we went from $500 to $600 because the OEMs would put more memory on or put stupid coolers on or whatever. Yeah, and then all of a sudden the price jumped up a lot about 5 years ago.
Yeah,
6 years ago.
Yeah, it's inflated so much in the last few years that it's hard to remember a time like this. Also, and then I have to read the rest of this email. Also, and this is a bit off topic, do AMD's new Thunderbird and Duron CPUs have as many compatibility problems as the original Athlon did when it launched? Just,
oof.
Yeah, given my recent turmoil with this machine.
Greg gave the right answer, which was the GeForce 2 MX. The Voodoo 4 would probably be, by the time December, like this issue would have come out in October, probably September, October. And by the time this issue was out, 3DFX would be dead.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. There's a picture, or not a picture. I'm sorry. He mentions the Voodoo 5 in that Creative Labs review.
The Voodoo 4 4500. Oh,
no, that's the photo. Yeah. If you go back and look at the review, he says, hey, if you have a Voodoo 5, you probably don't need to run out and get one of these GeForce 2 Ultras. Like the Voodoo 5 never shipped in any real quantity.
I had a review unit at this point, probably when he was writing this, if I had to guess.
Yeah. The bigger thing for this question though, there is the AMD thing. Like, hey, do the AMD CPUs still have the more things change?
Some things never change.
Kind of stuff. Yes. What else do we have here?
The Duron and the Athlon, those were good CPUs for a long time.
The Duron 600 was the new Celeron 300A. I bought a Duron 600 and it ruled. And then I won a Thunderbird at an AMD event of all things. And those were both solid for sure. What I'm saying is come back in 3 years and you can get the next step up from the thing I have now. It'll be just fine. Let's see here. Maybe a couple more quick things here. This column from tongue twister. This column from Colin Williamson.
Oh, this one's really good.
Called Great Expectations, letter X dash Pectations. It's about the impending launch of the Xbox and what it's going to do to first-person shooters, which is like an incredibly prescient topic here because he really kind of hit the nail on the head with this.
Yeah, this is like people were hearing about the Xbox. Like we were hearing about the Xbox at this point because developers had them and they were building games for them. And they were talking. You were hearing a lot about it, basically.
Yeah.
But nobody knew. I guess the other console vendors were nervous. Like Sony and Japan in general were nervous about what Microsoft coming into a market was going to do, because up until that point, every market that Microsoft had entered, they'd utterly decimated everybody else that was there, and with the exception, I guess, of Intuit. So yeah, it was like Microsoft saying, "Hey, we're going to spend $500 million on a marketing campaign for this thing." It scared everybody, I guess.
Yeah.
And Colin's column. Pretty good.
This is a good amount of foresight in this. I mean, he mentions like there are a bunch of developers who have never touched a PlayStation or a Sega console who have signed up for the Xbox here. I mean, this is like a year before the Xbox shipped, but he's basically saying like, hey, a bunch of PC only game developers seem to be pretty excited about making games for this new Xbox. What is it's talking about the guy in Maryland who can't get a game working with his 1863 Pro Audio Spectrum. Like this is the console for that guy. Like kind of hit the nail on the head with this stuff, like it kind of was a PC in a box with like very simplified, streamlined online services and controls. He lays out like he's basically like should PC gamers be worried about this? And he lays out some possibilities. The most likely outcome he mentions is first-person shooter developers will, by necessity, adopt a more console-centric perspective, specifically designing for the Xbox from day one. This means simpler interfaces and control schemes. That sure is exactly what happened. Like earlier in the piece, he talks about like, what about games with more complex interfaces like Deus Ex or System Shock 2? I mean, 7 years after this, BioShock came out as a console-first game, like the next game in that lineage, basically. It totally happened.
It took a long time for us to get to the point that we can make a really good fake mouse interface with a gamepad. And now that we have that, everybody's perfect and there's nothing to complain about. Just press all those buttons and we'll go right along with our business.
Yeah.
I do like the idea, like the one thing he misses, he kind of hits this right and kind of misses, but the idea that the new market, the Xbox was going to open the console market to first person shooters, which it did end up being true. Thanks, Halo. Was going to train a whole new generation of players who would then move over to the PC. Kind of happened for a while, and now it's stopped. It seems like, because it seems like the people who are proficient on gamepad play on gamepad, and the people who are proficient on mouse and keyboard play on mouse and keyboard. And Fortnite and Call of Duty and Apex and maybe not Apex. I guess Apex. Is there crossplay on Apex?
I think yeah, there is.
Yeah, we all play together, and it kind of just works out.
Yeah,
kind of a trip.
Hey, the best of all possible worlds.
Look, I want to go back to that Games for Windows game, Shadowgate, Shadowfield,
Whoa.
I don't know. The one where the mouse people, if you had a mouse and keyboard in that game, you walked as a god among the chuds.
Shadowrun on the 360?
On the 360 and Games for Windows Live.
I never played that online, but I heard stories. I mean, Quake 3 on the Dreamcast was the ultimate example of that.
Oh yeah, because you can plug a mouse and keyboard into that thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
What else we got?
Just about wrapped up here. There was a letter in the letter section here toward the end on page 251. I was going to mention from Josh Kriz. Your article got a license for that, and the October 2000 issue raises some interesting questions. Mark Rain, perhaps you've heard of him. Mark Rain claims that engine licensing helps reduce production time for games. However, at least one game that I can think of that used and later switched engines, Duke Nukem Forever, seems to be in a semi-permanent holding pattern. Daikatana 2 took years to come out despite its licensed engine technology. So what's the real deal here? Do you guys think it really saves time to license an engine? I mostly wanted to pull this because I know I've cited this a good bit in the last few months, but the John Romero autobiography or memoir that came out, he spends a decent amount of time on the engine licensing for Daikatana in that book and how much it was a boondoggle for them and how much it actually slowed things down, or like
It was a different time.
Well, it was a different time. I mean, I know things are different and much more complex now, or more complex in some ways, but also more streamlined in others. I know it's not like directly applicable to the modern day, but like he gives some pretty good examples that kind of help you understand why licensing an engine wouldn't be this as simple as just like, you know, putting a source code disk in and pressing run and starting to make levels or whatever. Like some of the challenges that came up that actually held them back are explained pretty well.
Back then, the engine licenses weren't made to be products either. They were made to be engines for a game that somebody made and then sold to everybody else who wanted to make that same game, right?
Yeah. I mean, like obviously, like licensing the Unreal Engine is a massive business unto itself these days. Like the support is, you know, it's night and day from what it used to be, but still, like it's just illustrative to hear some examples of problems that you would run into using somebody else's technology, especially because that's the era this letter is talking about here.
So there's two other things in this letters column that are pretty good. There's the "Are PC games doomed?" letter, which is from Name Withheld via the internet. When I read your State of the PC Union article, I thought it was well thought out and well written. The most important point you made, in my opinion, was about how the Japanese market has elevated comic books into the realm of mainstream by creating comics for everyone, leaving no one out. It's an important point. So anyway, people are talking about the PC being doomed at this point in 2000. I think it ended up working out okay, but it was a concern for a while until Steam started selling billions of dollars worth of games every year. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is "Become one with your inner nerd," which is in your preview of BioWare's forthcoming Star Wars RPG, which I assume is KOTOR.
Yes, I think that should have been announced by this time.
You said it would be the first Star Wars role-playing game. In point of fact, it's only the first computer-based RPG set in the universe. West End Games created the first Star Wars RPG back in 1987, and all you needed to play it was a pencil, paper, and some dice.
It's a pretty good comic book guy voice. It's not bad.
Yeah. So anyway, then they insult the reader who sent that in, rightly so, I think.
Yeah. They published another letter here, the entirety of which is Half-Life is a good game.
Can't argue with that.
That's pretty much what they said.
Half-Life is a good game. 260 pages of magazine.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then of course on the way out we get our kind of wholesale phone book looking hardware ads from, I guess this one is from Aberdeen Computers.
Oh yeah, they used to, yeah. I bought parts from Aberdeen back in the day.
It's kind of the computer shopper section. Here's a section of Cat5 patch cables.
Good old ad index. That's hey, we have a page we got to fill, guys.
Dude,
like put an ad index in there.
Half of the PC cases in this list don't even list a brand. It's quite literally just generic PC case. Like this stuff was so basic back then.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, this is around the time you first started seeing like Cooler Master. I think we saw our first Cooler Master aluminum case in like 2001.
Okay.
So this would be when you go out and if you ask for a case by name, it would be unusual. Like Adtronics, Computech. God, what was the other one? There was one that Maximum PC really liked in this time period. That was gorgeous, but it was like a steel frame, 800-pound machine. Like memory was commodity. You just ask for the same DIMMs, right? Or SIMs.
There are a few brands. In fact, actually, it's just Corsair and King Max are the only two, but there's a bunch of memory on here that doesn't even list a brand on it. It's just like, 4 meg by 32, 72 pin.
Parity. EVO. Yeah, with parity or without.
Just generic memory, generic cases.
Which chipset do you want on your motherboard? That's what the choice is.
Oh, all these 8-bit boards. What are the brands here? 8-bit. There's a bunch of 8-bit boards, a bunch of Asus boards, Epix,
yeah,
EPOX.
FIC is first. I can't remember what FIC stood for. First internet computer, first international computer, I think.
Here are some Intel boards back when Intel still made their own motherboards.
They made motherboards for a long time.
Wild. Stuff's so wild to look at. Here's mid-tower with, it's hard to actually make sense of all the specs and stuff in here, but here's a mid-tower with a 230-watt power supply for $29.99.
Yep, that sounds about right. That sounds about right. It was a weird time for all of this stuff.
Yes.
They this was the end of the year one, so they had to have the statement of ownership and the ABC circulation stuff in here. Audit Bureau circulation, I think. They made sure our numbers were legit.
Huh.
Here's Chips and Bits, where you could get all the old games.
Oh, Chips and Bits.
Yeah. PlayStation, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, Majora's Mask, The Last Good Zelda.
Here's Elite Force for $39.95.
Wow, $35.95. That's
I just let that Zelda comment pass unremarked upon.
I don't know what Zelda comment you're talking about.
These are fun.
Yeah,
I like looking at all these old ads. The very last thing here is a Dell ad. If you want to talk about the very last thing, or okay, there's a Creative Labs speakers, but right before that, if you want to look at what a reasonably spec'd out Dell looked like at the time, for $1,200, a Pentium 3 at 800 megahertz. Wow, that's actually faster. That's faster than I remember. 64 megabytes of RAM.
Pentium 3 is capped out high three digits, as I recall.
I guess I had forgotten that the Pentium 3 had gotten that fast.
Yeah, they were hot though.
Sure. Because the Pentium 2 was under 500, right? I don't think
450, 500. 500 was when the Pentium 3 switchover happened.
Right.
And then the Pentium 4 launched at 1.6 gigahertz or something.
Yeah. Do you remember what was a V.90 capable 56K modem? Was V.90 some kind of compression standard?
V.90 is the enhanced error correction thing that gave you a little bit more. It was asymmetrical 56K down and then 19.6 or 19.2 or something up. I can't remember.
Right. I had gone off to school at this time and had ceased to care about modems.
Yeah, I moved here and had broadband by this point, so it didn't matter anymore.
Yeah. Anyway, that's
that's
PC Gamer December 2000. It
was a fine year. Like I said, the glorious time between the end of the Millennium Bug and before 9/11.
It's dark.
Anything was possible.
I didn't say it when you brought that historical framing up early in the episode. That's like a dark window to think about there.
Yeah, it was a weird time.
I mean, at the time it was not dark, but in retrospect, just thinking about boy, things are about to change significantly.
Well, and just to be clear, the economy crashed before 9/11 and then it just got worse after that.
Yeah.
So Future had launched 7 magazines, I think, in 2000, which when Chris Anderson of TED talked about launching 7 magazines at the company meeting that year, he was like, everybody said it couldn't be done, but we've done it. We launched 7 magazines. And then in February of 2001, all 7 of those magazines were shut down.
Turns out everyone was right. It just took a while.
It turns out, you should not try to launch 7 magazines in 1 year if you're a 300 person company.
Yeah. Had the .com bubble begun to burst at this point? Or was that shortly after this? I can't remember.
That was... that's February 2001 is when the bubble burst.
Oh, wow. So we're right before that here.
Yeah.
Fun times.
It was a good time. So I guess it's time for us to thank our patrons. This is the end of the show.
You guess. I'm going to say definitively it's time to thank our patrons.
Well, I was trying to think of a pithy way to wrap up the whole thing, but I got nothing. So we'll thank the patrons. As always, Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod is a 100% listener supported show. If you would like to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/techpod and join the ranks of our wonderful patrons and get access to the fabulous TechPod Discord and our monthly patron exclusive episode and make something help make something you like happen every month, which we appreciate.
Continue to exist.
Yeah. So as always, thank you to everyone. But a very special thank you goes to our executive producer tier patrons, including Nick Johnston, Paddle Creek Games, makers of Fractured Veil, Andrew Slosky, Jordan Lippett, $, Just Wedge, Joel Krauska, Twinkle Twinkie, David Allen, James Kamek, and Pantheon, makers of the HS3 high-speed 3D printer.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. That'll do it for us this week. We will be back next week with another episode of the show. Thank you all for listening. And if you have a magazine that you think would be good for a future one of these episodes, post it in the thread in the Discord or send us an email.
Yes. A, if you have issue suggestions. B, just also if you want to let us know if you like these or not. I think the Bite issue went over pretty well, so always curious to hear what people think about these kinds of retrospectives.
Yeah. And we'll be back next week with another episode of the show. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.